Birmingham Southern College was founded in 1854, and since then it's been a staple in Alabama's higher education. Unfortunately, due to financial troubles and mismanagement, the college will be forced to close its doors after spring 2024. Luckily, this didn't stop me from continuing my project, or graduating. My name is Samuel Odom, and back in 2023, I took a journalism class. In that class, I was assigned a project where I needed to look through old BSC newspapers and write an article based on them. A lot was happening in Birmingham in 1963, from violent racism to a little tank roaming the streets. 1963 was a pretty volatile year for the city, and according to BSC's student newspaper, they received a fossil. No mention of any other events that year, though. The original article from 1963 stated that the fossil was found in 1951 and could have been as large as 35 feet long. As soon as I read that, I knew I needed to see this thing with my own eyes. There's only one problem, though. BSC no longer has a geology department, and it's been some time since they did. I started my search by contacting Sarah Faxel.
Yes, so Dr. Kevin Drace introduced me to that room last year, and I really loved the maps. I thought the maps were really cool. I love very detailed maps of Alabama, but also just looking at a lot of the vertebrate, invertebrate, bird preserved stuff. I know that Dr. Megan Gibbons used to use a lot of that. Lots of fossils as well. I was really excited about it, and I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to use this for my class. And then honestly, part of the reason I haven't used it too much is because I actually don't have a key to that room. That room is kept very secure for good reason.
After speaking with Professor Faxel, I realized that I needed a professor who had been there long enough to know about the geology department. After doing a little research, I found Dr. Gannon, who has been here since 1995. After emailing back and forth, he agreed to meet with me to give me a tour of the specimen room. While we were there, I asked him about the geology department. He had quite the story to tell about it.
The story I heard about the geology department was that there was and I heard this from Dr. Holloman, who collected all the specimens that you see around you originally, not everything that's in here, but here as students collected almost every specimen that's in here. And he was just a great guy. I'd go out in the field with him, and my specialty was arthropods. So I knew the insects when we'd go out in the field together. The story he told me about the geology department was that there was a professor who was a little bit of a wild card. And Dr. Birdie was president of the college at that time, Neil Birdie, and that was early on in Dr. Birdie's tenure. He was here for a long time. He was a good, stable presence for the college. He did a lot of great things, but he was also a very tightly wrapped person. So he was meticulous, and he didn't like this professor that was a wild card. And one day, that professor decided to take a bunch of rocks and line the sidewalks of the academic quad, and didn't ask for permission to do this or any kind of clearance. And it infuriated Dr. Birdie, so the story goes. And so he couldn't fire a tenured professor for something like that, because it's not moral turpitude, which is the only reason you can fire one of the only reasons you can fire a tenured professor. You can also fire them if their services are no longer needed because the department that they were in no longer exists. So he got rid of the geology department.
The last interview was at the McGuane Science Center in downtown Birmingham. Here you'll find just about everything, from an aquarium featuring turtles, eels, some celebrities, and even a giant bass. But most importantly, there are fossils. And where there are fossils, there are paleontologists. That's why I'm here. June Ebersol was the man of the hour. He confirmed via email that McGuane did indeed have this specimen, and was gracious enough to bring it out of storage to show us on camera.
Birmingham Southern had donated the specimen to the old Red Mountain Museum, which was the Birmingham's Natural History Museum that opened in 1978. And so at the time when the Red Mountain Museum had first started, they had no collection. So they were acquiring a number of what we call orphaned collections from around town. There were collections of stuffed birds at the Birmingham Public Library, for example. Indian Springs schools had thousands of historical shells from around the world that they had collected over the years. But then Birmingham Southern, where they used to have a geology department, had a small collection of fossils. From what I understand, there were 3 different specimens mixed together in one box. So first of all, separating out two mosasaurs that were in the same box, then also a dinosaur. The dinosaur that came out of there was interesting, where it was a juvenile nodosaur, meaning basically a baby armored dinosaur. And it turned out to be the most complete armored dinosaur ever found in the eastern half of the country. So that was significant. So also collected by Birmingham Southern within the same box. As for the Tylosaurus specimen, just a few years ago, I was working with a colleague on mosasaur pathologies, and that particular specimen has kind of softball-sized vertebrae, so they're backbones that are all strung together. These ones, they had a pathology where the vertebrae didn't segment, meaning they were stuck together, meaning this mosasaur had trouble. They were swimming through the water sort of like a snake. But this thing would have had a big stiff part in its backbone. So it was a massive injury. Massive pathology would have affected its swimming. But this is a big specimen, so it lived with that pathology for its entire life. These are dominant in Alabama in a time period called the Campanian, which is near the end of the age of the dinosaurs. And so this thing here is going to be, the Birmingham Southern specimen is going to be right around 75 to 80 million years old. And rocks of that time period only outcrop in a certain little belt in Alabama. It's going to be in the Black Belt. It's going to be in a stretch of line that basically connects Demopolis to Selma to Marion Junction to Montgomery. It's going to be in that stretch right there.
And without further ado, BSC's Missing Mosasaur. Just kidding, this isn't it. This is what the fossil would have looked like if it had been preserved better. The only recognizable part of the fossil is its jawbone, which is actually on display, which is pretty cool. But after finally seeing the fossil with my own eyes, I couldn't shake off a sense of mild disappointment. The passage of time was cruel to our poor fossilized friend. The article described the fossil as a grand spectacle, yet it turned out to be nothing more than a small box of rocks that faintly resembled any creature. After being moved so many times over the years, all that remained was a shell of its former self. The irony wasn't lost on me, but it reminded me of the final scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the coveted artifact is unceremoniously stowed away in a crate, destined to collect dust in a museum storage facility.